Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever really stopped to think why the United States backs Israel so strongly? I mean, even when facing a lot of global criticism.
Yeah, it looks like this almost destined relationship sometimes, doesn't it?
Right. But when you dig into the history, it wasn't always like this. Well, it's much more complicated and honestly full of surprises. It goes way beyond just modern politics.
Definitely.
So our mission today, you see, is to take a journey back. Not just a few decades, but really over 2,000 years.
Quite a sweep.
Yeah. We're going to trace these incredibly complex paths. Jews, Christians, Muslims, sometimes allies, sometimes enemies. We want to understand the deep, deep roots of Israel's origins and these, well, unique alliances we see today.
And the sources are pretty varied, right? Ancient texts, modern analysis.
Exactly. A real tapestry. We've looked at historical accounts, geopolitical stuff, everything. We promise we'll guide you through it, hopefully with some surprising insights and, a clear path.
What's fascinating here, right from the start, is that you can't understand the present without looking way back. Not just recent politics, but ancient religious and political dynamics. It's not a simple story. It's this long, winding historical arc, and every major shift kind of laid the groundwork for what came next. The past really does shape the present.
So let's kick things off. Where do we begin? Maybe 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Ancient Palestine, Roman Empire.
Perfect starting point. Jewish life under Rome, it wasn't easy.
No, far from it. Subjugation, persecution, treated almost like slaves in some ways. And the Jewish scholars back then, they were deeply rooted in their texts, waiting for a Messiah.
Someone to save them from the Romans. They expected a powerful ally, a king maybe.
Exactly. Then Jesus, as-salam, arrives on the scene. And here's where it gets, well, complicated, according to the biblical accounts.
Right.
He actually started speaking out against those scholars, accusing them of, corrupting the religion.
Which naturally created huge friction.
Immense friction. The Gospels say the Jewish leaders then plotted with the Roman authorities to have him executed. There's that pivotal, chilling biblical passage.
Oh, with Pontius Pilate.
Yes, where Pilate says Jesus' blood isn't on Roman hands, but on the Jews and their generations. And the leaders are quoted responding, "Let his blood be on us and on our children."
A line that had devastating consequences later, fueling centuries of anti-Semitism in Christian lands, regardless of its literal historical accuracy. It became a core belief.
Absolutely. Now, according to some accounts, Jesus ultimately escaped their plot. But after he departed, things never really settled down for Jews in Palestine.
No, peace was over.
Soon after, you get this devastating war between the Romans and the Jews. The result, total destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, their holiest site, gone.
And the permanent expulsion of Jews from Palestine, kicked out.
For the next 500 years, every Jew, pretty much everywhere, held on to this one deep desire. Somehow, miraculously return home.
And that 500-year longing, if we connect this to the bigger picture, really sets the stage for the next massive shift in the region.
Which is?
About 5 centuries later, you see the rise of the Medina state and then the Islamic Caliphate expanding rapidly.
Right, reshaping everything.
And under Khalifa Omar bin Khattab II, Caliph, super important figure, the Muslims conquer Palestine and Jerusalem from the Romans, or rather the Byzantines by then.
Okay. And there's a crucial detail here, isn't there, about the surrender?
Yes. The Christians in Jerusalem, when they surrendered, they made one specific condition to Omar. Keep the Jews out. Don't let them come back.
Wow. But Omar
bin Khattab decided differently. He used his authority and actually allowed Jews back into Jerusalem against the Christians' wishes.
That's remarkable. And it led to what?
It ushered in this really quite extraordinary 400-year period, a strong friendship, cooperation between Jews and Muslims. Christians were often seen as the common enemy then.
400 years. It shows how political realities can shift things, doesn't it? Bridging even deep religious divides.
Exactly. Shared interests, mutual benefit. It's a pattern we see again and again. Alliances are fluid.
But history never stands still, right? That alliance faced its own massive test.
The Crusades.
Pope Urban II. That famous call to arms in Europe. He tells everyone, go reclaim Jerusalem from the Muslims.
And surprisingly, perhaps, the European Christians managed to conquer Palestine relatively easily at first.
Why is that?
Well, many Muslim rulers were frankly distracted. Internal conflicts, more interested in their own power and luxuries than unity.
The accounts from that time are just horrific. Al-Aqsa Mosque reportedly filled with bodies.
Terrible scenes. But here's a really significant point historians note. The Crusaders' hatred for Jews was often even more intense than for Muslims.
Why? Still the belief about Jesus' death.
Primarily, yes. That narrative was incredibly powerful in medieval Europe. So the persecution of Jews during the Crusades was brutal. They burned synagogues, temples, killed thousands.
So another shift coming.
Absolutely. This chaos eventually leads to the rise of Salahuddin Ayyubi, a new Muslim leader who manages to unite forces and reconquer Palestine.
And the Jews' position in this.
Remarkably, they overwhelmingly supported Salahuddin, all Jews, including the most famous Jewish scholar of the era, Maimonides.
The philosopher and doctor.
That's him. He was actually Salahuddin's personal physician. They fully backed Salahuddin in this war against the Crusaders.
So, back to cooperation.
Yes, a return to peaceful coexistence between Muslims and Jews, not just in Palestine, but across Muslim-ruled lands. Jews generally lived with respect, and they often actively avoided Christian areas.
You mentioned Al-Andalus before, Muslim Spain.
The prime example. For 800 years, it was this incredibly powerful, rich region, a vibrant center intellectually, economically. Some of the most influential Jewish communities thrived there.
800 years.
Yeah.
That's such a long time. But it didn't last forever.
No. Eventually, Christian leaders reconquered Spain.
Ah.
The Reconquista.
And the choice for Muslims and Jews was stark.
Convert to Christianity or leave. Simple as that. Most wouldn't abandon their faith, obviously.
So where did they go?
Many were welcomed by the Ottoman Sultan Bayezid. He invited both Muslims and Jews to the Ottoman Empire, promising they'd be looked after.
Okay, so this brings us right to that central, fascinating question. You have this centuries-long alliance, or at least coexistence, between Jews and Muslims. How on earth did that shatter? How did we get to Jews and Christians becoming allies, often against Muslims?
Yeah, it's the core puzzle, isn't it?
You hear some wild theories sometimes, right? Secret societies, magic, jinns helping people get rich.
Oh, yeah, the conspiracy theories are out there. But let's stick to the history. Those are just stories. The real story is, well, far more interesting, and it's rooted in economics and politics.
Okay, so what is the real story?
It really starts picking up steam after Columbus discovers America. Europe experiences this massive economic boom.
Right, the center of gravity starts shifting.
Exactly. And gradually, Jews begin moving from Muslim lands towards Europe, towards the opportunity. But, and this is crucial, European Christians still deeply resented Jews.
So they arrive, but they're not exactly welcomed with open arms.
Not at all. Laws were passed. Jews could live there, yes, but couldn't buy land, couldn't get into politics, couldn't join the military.
Left them with very few options.
Basically one main path, business. And they became incredibly successful traders, merchants, businessmen.
Which created this weird imbalance.
Paradoxical, yeah. Christians had tons of wealth tied up in land, but often little ready cash. Jews couldn't own land, but they accumulated huge amounts of liquid capital, cash.
And the lending thing.
Ah, yes. Jewish religious law at the time forbade lending at interest to other Jews, but not to people of other faiths.
So they started lending to Christians?
Outrageous? Widely. It became incredibly common. Even Shakespeare wrote about it in his plays. You know, nobles and kings borrowing from Jewish moneylenders.
Right, like the Merchant of Venice.
Exactly. Shows how embedded it was in society.
So this growing wealth led to banks.
Small banks initially, popping up in cities across Europe. But there was a persistent problem.
What was that?
Kings. If they couldn't or wouldn't repay their loans, they'd just kick the Jews out. Or worse, kill them. Wiped the slate clean, destroyed their businesses.
Not exactly stable.
Not at all. This led to a key realization. They needed something bigger, a centralized international banking system that couldn't be taken down by one angry king.
And this is where modern international finance really starts to emerge.
You could definitely argue that. Enter Mayer Rothschild, a very powerful German Jew. He creates what many see as the world's first truly international bank.
And his strategy was?
Brilliant, really. He sent his 5 sons out, one to each major European capital, London, Paris, Vienna, Naples, Frankfurt, to establish the biggest banks there.
Creating a network.
A powerful network. If one brother's bank got into trouble, say, with the French king, the other brothers in London, Vienna, etc., would pool their resources and save it. Made them almost invulnerable to single rulers.
The influence must have been enormous.
Immense. The Spanish Empire, the French Empire, the British Empire, all borrowed heavily from the Rothschilds at various points.
And this power really solidified during the Napoleonic Wars.
That was the key moment. The Rothschilds made a huge strategic bet. They decided to back the British Empire against Napoleon.
Funding the war effort.
Massively funding it. Their support was crucial to the British victory, which was Napoleon's biggest downfall. And get this, their private intelligence network was so good.
Yeah.
They often got news from Europe before the British king did. That's how they made fortunes and cemented their influence.
So by helping Britain win.
They helped propel the British Empire to become the world's undisputed superpower. And by this time, Jews in Europe weren't just bankers. They were reaching the peaks of influence, key jobs, intellectual life, massive economic control.
So they have immense power, influence, wealth. What's the next logical step?
Well, after 2,000 years in exile, the thought starts to bubble up more strongly, returning to Palestine. But not returning as the weak, subjugated people they were under Rome.
Returning as the strong.
Exactly. And this is where what you might call secret Zionism begins. Not yet a big public movement, but actions on the ground.
Like what?
We see about 4,000 Jews, maybe more, starting to quietly migrate to Palestine from different parts of the world.
And doing what there?
Buying land. Quietly buying up barren, seemingly worthless land from poor Arab farmers, often paying double or triple the actual price.
And the Rothschilds were involved here too.
Absolutely. They provided significant funding for these early land purchases. A great example is this barren, sandy area they bought called Ahuzat Bay.
What is that now?
Tel Aviv, Israel's capital, one of the most advanced cities globally, built on that initially barren land.
Wow. So the Jewish population starts increasing.
Slowly at first, then picking up pace, and they start building infrastructure. Hebrew newspapers appear, radio stations, even TV shows later on, actively reviving the Hebrew language in Palestine itself after 2,000 years.
This quiet growth, it raises an important question, doesn't it? What turns this trickle into a real political force?
Well, they find a new, incredibly powerful ally. Unexpected, perhaps?
Who's that?
American evangelical Christians.
Really? How did that happen?
Largely sparked by this book, Jesus is Coming. It sold millions and millions of copies in America.
And its message.
The core idea that captivated American Christians was Jesus will only return to earth after the Jews have reestablished their own country in Palestine.
So the restoration of Israel was seen as a necessary precondition for the Second Coming.
Exactly. This belief became deeply ingrained, and it led many American Christians to actively lobby the U.S. president, push the government to help make Israel a reality in Palestine.
So you have this grassroots Christian support merging with the Zionist political goals.
Precisely. And that leads to the official public emergence of the Zionist movement. The first big public Zionist meeting happens in Switzerland.
Led by Theodor Herzl.
Right. And Herzl makes this incredibly bold prediction. He tells the world, in exactly 50 years, Jews will have their own country in Palestine.
Which must have sounded impossible at the time.
Completely impossible to most people. They even published the design for Israel's flag at that meeting. It was a statement of intent.
And Herzl sent spies, didn't he? Or observers.
2 observers, yes, to Jerusalem. They sent back this famous coded message.
The bride is beautiful.
But she is married to someone else.
Yeah, this is someone else.
The Ottoman Caliphate, ruled then by Sultan Abdul Hamid II, who was known for being very strict, very resistant to losing territory.
So Herzl approached him directly.
Yes, made a direct offer. The Zionists would pay off the Ottoman Empire's huge foreign debt.
In exchange for Palestine.
Exactly. But the Sultan's reply was emphatic. Absolutely not. He reportedly said, even if you cut my body into pieces, I will never hand over Palestine to you people.
Wow. So direct conflict declared, essentially.
That moment really marked the start of the open struggle between the Ottomans and the Zionists.
Okay, so the Ottoman doors slam shut. What's the next move for the Zionists?
They turn back to their old friends, the ones they helped make powerful, the British Empire.
To ask them for help getting a country.
To beg for a country, basically. The British initially offered other places, Uganda, maybe Argentina, places in their empire.
But the Zionists weren't interested in Uganda.
No, they were unequivocal. Just like Germans belong in Germany, French in France, Jews belong in Palestine. That's the only homeland.
So the focus shifted to bringing down the Ottoman Empire.
It became a key strategic goal for the collective Zionist effort. They saw the Ottomans as the main obstacle.
And then comes World War I.
The pivotal event. The British Empire needs help again, finds itself in this massive global conflict. Who do they turn to?
Their old allies, the Rothschilds.
Exactly. And the British make a monumental promise to the Rothschild family to secure their financial backing and wider Jewish support.
The promise being.
If you help us win this war, specifically, help us seize Palestine from the Ottoman Caliphate, your ally, then Britain will support the creation of a Jewish state there.
A quid pro quo on a massive scale.
Huge. And as a result, Jewish communities around the world largely sided with the British Empire during World War I.
And Britain succeeded in taking Palestine.
Relatively easily, yes. The Ottoman Empire was weakening.
Which leads to the Balfour Declaration, 1917.
That's right. British Foreign Minister Arthur Balfour apparently influenced himself by that Jesus is Coming book.
It's still playing a role.
Sends that famous letter to Walter Rothschild. It promises full British support for establishing a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine.
There was a big problem on the ground.
A huge demographic problem. In 1917, Palestine was still only about 10% Jewish. 90% were Muslim Arabs.
So a declaration is one thing, making it a reality is another.
Absolutely. The Zionist leadership knew they had to change those numbers fast. They needed to get more Jews into Palestine. This led to a major push for Jewish migration right after World War I ended.
Okay, but the Rothschilds backing Britain in WWI,
Yeah.
that had consequences elsewhere,
Right.
especially in Germany.
Profound consequences. Remember, the Rothschild dynasty started in Germany, but their decision to back Britain, Germany's enemy, and help defeat Germany's ally, the Ottoman Empire.
That created deep resentment in Germany.
Deep resentment. Many Germans felt betrayed. They knew who, in their view, had financed the other side.
And this resentment, Adolf Hitler tapped into it.
He weaponized it. He brilliantly, tragically convinced millions of Germans that Jewish betrayal was a key reason they lost World War I.
His speeches were incredibly charismatic, apparently.
He's mesmerizing to many. He made this anti-Jewish rhetoric mainstream, widely believed. And one of the first things he did was target Jewish economic power.
Closing businesses.
All Jewish businesses in Germany, including the original Rothschild Bank in Frankfurt, which had been operating for 200 years, gone.
And then, as Hitler's army conquered Europe,
They systematically persecuted and murdered Jews in every city they captured. The Holocaust.
an unimaginable horror.
But even in this darkness, the Rothschilds and other Zionist leaders saw, well, not an opportunity in a positive sense, but a path to their goal, tragically accelerated.
How so?
Jews fleeing the terror in Europe, desperate to escape. They were actively directed towards Palestine.
So the Holocaust horrifyingly fueled migration to Palestine.
Dramatically. Remember, after WWI, Jews were about 10% of the population there. After WWII, it jumped to over 30%.
A huge demographic shift in just a couple of decades.
Massive.
Wow.
Meanwhile, Britain wins WWII, but is totally exhausted, financially drained. Its empire starts collapsing. India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka gain independence.
And the Zionists in Palestine see their chance.
They demand Britain make good on the Balfour Declaration promise, create the Jewish state.
But Britain hesitated. It's still the numbers issue.
Still the numbers, only 30-something% Jewish. It was politically difficult. How do you hand over a country when the majority population is against it?
So the Zionists, they turned on Britain, their old ally.
Yes. Frustrated by the delays and perceived betrayal, Zionist groups began attacking British forces and installations in Palestine. Resistance, some called it terrorism,
So the British were caught in the middle.
completely caught between Jewish aspirations and Arab resistance. They couldn't handle it anymore, so they washed their hands of it and referred the whole Palestine problem to the newly formed United Nations,
And the UN came up with the partition plan.
which many, even at the time, called deeply flawed. Some historians call it one of the most questionable decisions ever made by the UN.
Why? How did it divide the land?
It split Palestine into 3 parts. Controversially, the largest share of the land went to the roughly 33% Jewish population.
Wow.
A smaller share went to the 66% Muslim Arab population, and Jerusalem was designated as an international city controlled by neither side. It's like dividing a cake for 10 people, giving half to 3 of them and the other half to the remaining 7. It just seemed inherently unfair to the majority.
How was it received?
Jews, naturally, celebrated. They finally had international backing for a state. But the Palestinian Arab leadership, the Arab Higher Committee, led by Garana Mufti Amin al-Husseini,
The one who had connections with Hitler during the war.
that's the one, a very controversial figure. They rejected the UN plan completely, outright rejection.
So, with the Arabs rejecting the plan, what happened next?
David Ben-Gurion, the Zionist leader, saw his moment. On May 14th, 1948, he stands up on Rothschild Boulevard in Tel Aviv, fitting street name.
Right. Stands directly under a big picture of Theodore Herzl, and declares the independence of the State of Israel.
Exactly 50 years after Herzl's prediction.
Precisely 50 years.
Yeah.
It's uncanny. And the world's reaction.
Lightning fast. The United States recognized Israel just 11 minutes later.
11 minutes.
Then the Soviet Union, surprisingly quickly too, and other nations. Even one Islamic country recognized them early on, Reza Shah's Iran. Pre-revolution Iran, of course.
But independence celebrations were short-lived.
Very short-lived. Just one day later, 5 neighboring Arab countries attacked Israel, aiming to destroy the new state.
How did Israel survive that?
They fought fiercely, and crucially, they received significant, often covert support weapons, funding from the U.S. and Britain. They didn't just survive, they crushed the Arab armies.
And expanded their territory.
Significantly. They ended up controlling even more land than the UN partition plan had originally allocated to them, including parts meant for the Arab state.
But they still had that core problem, right? Demographics.
The biggest problem. Even after the war and expansion, Arab Muslims still significantly outnumbered Jews within the borders Israel now controlled.
So what was Israel's next major act?
This is where we get into the Nakba, the catastrophe, as Palestinians call it. The systematic displacement of Palestinians who had lived there for centuries, some for 1,000 years.
How did they do that?
It involved military actions, destruction of villages. Major Palestinian cities were emptied. Around 500 Arab villages were destroyed or depopulated.
There are also some very grim allegations from that period.
Yes, deeply contested allegations, but part of the historical narrative for Palestinians. Reports, including eyewitness accounts, claim that in some areas, water wells and pipes were deliberately contaminated to force out remaining Palestinians who refused to leave.
The result was a mass exodus.
A huge exodus. Around 800,000 Palestinian Muslims fled or were expelled from their homes in just about a single year.
And where did they go? Refugee camps in neighboring countries mostly.
Mostly, yes. And simultaneously, Israel facilitated the arrival of around 700,000 Jews from around the world, Europe, Arab countries to settle in the empty homes and lands.
Flipping the demographics.
Exactly. This raised the Jewish population to somewhere between 60 and 70% almost overnight. It was a deliberate strategy to secure a Jewish majority and consolidate Zionist rule. And arguably, variations of this strategy displacing Palestinians, expanding settlements, continue to shape the conflict today.
What an absolutely incredible, often tragic journey we've covered. 2,000 years. So many unexpected twists, alliances forming and breaking. It really defies any simple explanation.
It really does. And what this deep dive hopefully underscores is that the situation today, the strong alliances, the deep-seated conflicts, the competing narratives, none of it came out of nowhere. It's all deeply, deeply rooted in this long, incredibly complex, often painful history. Religion, economics, politics, power, it's all woven together. You really can't understand the present without appreciating these historical layers.
So, considering this whole intricate history we've just walked through, the shifting alliances, the powerful motivations, the echoes of the past, it leaves you wondering, doesn't it? How will the future of this region continue to be shaped by these same historical forces? And maybe, what role could new global players have in this ancient, still unfolding story?
That's a question to ponder, isn't it? History doesn't repeat exactly, but its echoes are certainly loud.